Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Take three. Good afternoon. Welcome to the July 1st Friday Club program. I am Marcy Fessler, president of the First Friday Club Board. In the name of our officers, board members, and committees, I am honored to welcome you to our luncheon and presentation this afternoon. As a reminder, if anyone needs religious education certification hours, please sign the form that's located on the registration table. Also on the registration table are flyers with information about our August luncheon and our teaser flyer with information about next season. The trifolds for next season will be ready at our August luncheon. So you have to come back and get a trifold next month. 3 weeks. On the registration table, we also have the email forms if you have not joined our email list, and donation envelopes. And I'd like to take a moment because we had several generous donations last month, and we once again have enough funds to cover the increased cost of our luncheon for this month. So I thank you so much for your kindness and generosity as we struggle to make ends meet these next couple of months. At this time, I ask everybody to pull out their cell phones and make sure it's turned to silent. As a reminder, it's a little distracting when phones go off and notifications go off, so please make sure you check that now. For any information on our programs or any changes, be sure to like us on Facebook. As you know by now, we are videotaping our programs. It usually is about a month before they're on our YouTube channel, and we are working it out so there is a link that will be easy to access on our website. We are looking for a few people to join our board. If you are interested or would like some more information about joining our board, please let me know or one of our board members. And you can tell our board members we have the cute little tags. Please join me in thanking Dr. Linda Lucarell Miller for sponsoring Father Balasko and Rabbi Schonberger today. Thank you, Linda. Next month's presentation is on August 1st, and it will be Dr. Gabriel Syed Reynolds, who will present on the Quran and the Bible. Father Balasko, Rabbi Schonberger, are you open to questions at the end of your presentation? That was a resounding yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Half of our presentation will be at Q&A.
And before I introduce Linda, let's put our hearts and minds, bow our heads, remembering our presenters and all who have gathered here in this room. In a spirit of praise and thanks, we say, Amen. God, our Creator, you sustain our lives through the gift of your Spirit and the following of Jesus. Stir in us the desire to learn, to love, to serve more generously, and to act on behalf of justice and truth. We ask these blessings in your holy name. Amen. Amen. Linda?
It is my distinct honor to introduce today's presenters, Father George Balasko and Rabbi Joseph Schonberger, co-presenters since 1997. My father, Dom Lucarell, who died 2 years ago, was a dedicated student, adult learner of Father Balasko's classes during the 1980s. I was privileged as a religion teacher at Ursuline High School to take students to Rabbi Schonberger's synagogue for Jewish-Christian dialogue presentations. and I thank him for his hospitality during those. Father George Balasko retired as pastor of St. Anne Church, East Liverpool. He continues his work in adult education through his programming with the Villa Maria Education and Spirituality Center. For decades, Father George has been a leader in the efforts of ecumenism and interreligious relations, particularly with the Jewish-Christian dialogue, an outcome of the Second Vatican Council. For his tireless work, Father Balasko has been recognized through numerous awards, such as the Guardian of the Menorah Award in 2012 from the B'nai B'rith of Youngstown, the Louis D. Brandeis Award, and the Kfar Silver Scholarship Plaque. Rabbi Joseph Schonberger is the son of Holocaust survivors. His tradition and family have shaped his belief that every person has a God-given sacred purpose and meaning in this world and beyond. Rabbi Schonberger grew up in Canada, coming to the United States for higher education in Miami and New York City. He attended Miami-Dade Community College, Columbia University, and the Jewish Theological Seminary. Rabbi studied music, psychology, and social work, and was ordained in 1981. He has ministered and led congregations in Bangor, Maine, and Youngstown, Ohio. Rabbi Schonberger has begun a nonprofit, Tradition for You, with hopes of helping people recognize and actualize their higher purpose through faith, learning, fellowship, and service to those in need. Please join me in extending a warm welcome and shalom to our presenters, Father Balasko and Rabbi Schonberger.
Okay, I think I'll start the show off, Rabbi. Frickin' frack. He has replaced Rabbi Meyer, and we did many an act in the sense of going out with Jewish Christian studies way back, starting about 40-some years ago.
Maybe 1962?
Well, don't mess me up with dates, Rabbi.
That was Vatican II,
Vatican
1962 to
Council too, but
65.
it started before that. It started before that because of the matchmaker is Sister Susan Shorston. Right at that time, we came out with a new burial rite in the Roman Catholic tradition. And she was doing a class at Youngstown State University on death and dying. At that time, I had just buried my father, trying to use the new rite of burial. Rabbi Meyer presented the Jewish ritual and rite on how they bury the dead. And the Protestant minister didn't show up, so Rabbi Meyer and I made up the script. And so basically that was the matchmaker that prevails even to this time. He would be celebrating your site on the 21st, that means he died, on the 21st of, what year? What year was it? It's going to, it's 100 years since he's been circumcised. Okay. Got to deal with that. That's reality. Okay. That's the Jewish life. That's why the Jewish people want those captives in Palestine, in a sense, to come back, because they have to have a burial rite for them. That's what is important. I don't know the Islamic, but good question for next month, in the sense that the Islamic community, how do they mourn their dead, and do they have to have the body to bury? Okay, so it's a lot of traditions here that we have to see. There's also another man we have to be concerned about, is Monsignor Gino Baroni. He came to our diocese right after I was ordained, and he said, basically, we have to understand our own culture before we can understand the cultures of other people. I noticed they just put that into effect 2 days ago. They had some kind of eating food from different nations, and they had the Polish menu there, and some of the black children and all that didn't appreciate the Polish menu. We have to learn to concentrate. I love spaghetti, and I am Croatian. And so basically, I'll go out of my way. In fact, there's something on Facebook about a dancing spaghetti, and so I made comment on it. And so basically, we got to know one another. We have to know one another, know our cultures, and know what we're all about. Pope Francis, I'll read his statement in a little bit of what he said about the Jewish community, keeping their faith at the time of difficulty. But now Joe and I are going to, Rabbi Joe, are going to have a little face-off here, okay?
Except I want to add one thing, because we mentioned Vatican II, and I want to say that I've gone to seminars, sessions with other clergy in different cities, different states, and Father George is very well known because a lot of people may not realize, although we remind people, that what he started with Jewish Christian dialogue and fellowship, that group is the longest continuous Jewish Christian fellowship and study group in North America. And it only happened because of his dedication, because he's gone through a lot of rabbis.
I had Italian neighbors, so I can speak in Italian. I'm going to say nothing. Rabbi and I are going to stand now, and I'm going to read you a script, and then we're going to go into it. You have to watch what we're doing bodily more than what you're hearing, okay? So I'll try to stand up. Rabbi will stand up. In here. Several centuries ago, the Pope decided that all the Jews had to leave the Vatican. Naturally, there was a big uproar from the Jews, so the Pope agreed to debate with the members of their community. If the Jews won, they could stay. If the Pope won, the Jews would leave. Knowing they had no choice, the Jews picked Rabbi Moshe, to represent them. His Latin wasn't very good, but he was a man of great faith and well respected. He accepted on condition that it would be a silent debate. The Pope agreed, and after that, what could be easier than a silent debate? On the day of the great debate, Moshe and the Pope sat opposite each other, just like we are here this afternoon. After a minute, the Pope raised his hand and showed one finger. One finger.
I'll show.
The Pope pulled out a glass of wine, and the Pope waved his finger at a circle around his head.
Moshe pointed to the ground. You're understanding this, right? It'll make sense. Don't worry.
The Pope pulled out a glass of wine, which is crystal water, and he pulled out a matzah.
And Moshe pulled out an apple. Pretend this is an apple.
The Pope stood up and said, "I give up. This man is too good. The Jews can stay." Now, as the puzzled cardinals clustered around the Pope, he emphasized, first I held up one finger to talk about the one God, and he held up three fingers, reminding us that there is a Trinity. When I waved my finger around to show that God was all around us, Moshe pointed down to show that God is also right here with us. When I showed him the wine and the wafer, well, it would be matzah, to show that God absolves us from our sins, Moshe showed me an apple to remind me of original sin, He had an answer for everything. What could I do?
Meanwhile, the Jews crowded around Moshe. What happened? They asked. Well, said Moshe, he said to me, you Jews have 3 days to leave. So I gave him the finger. Then he tells me the whole city would be cleared of Jews. So I said to him, we're staying right here. And then a woman asked, who knows, said Moshe. He took out his lunch, and I took out mine.
So, and there you have this great debate. And so what you have here is a misunderstanding. That's our problem with all of this ecumenical stuff. We misunderstand how people interpret what we say and what we do.
I have another short, very short,
That's your department.
very short one.
He's the comedian of the group. Although we had a
Well,
rabbi.
really, Father George.
We had a rabbi in town. Come on, I forgot his name now. Joel Berman, who was a comedian before he became a rabbi. He said, I was.
He almost couldn't get a job as a rabbi when they found out he was a comedian.
He says, my timing was always bad. Okay.
So there's a joke. A rabbi, minister, and a priest are standing on this road, and they're holding up a sign. The end is near. Turn back before it's too late. So some young people in a truck stop, and they give these guys a hard time. They give the clergymen a hard time. And they yell at them, they're just religious fanatics, don't bother us. And they keep going. Then you hear this huge crash. The rabbi says, that's the fourth one so far. And the minister says, you think we should change the sign to the bridge is out? There you go. So sometimes we clergy phrase things in such a way that other people don't quite understand. And so it is with Jewish-Christian dialogue. As we get together to talk about all kinds of different topics, over the years, before my time and in my time, we've approached this in many different ways, and at different times of day as well, with different groups. My time, we've also done this as a vehicle for helping people understand each other. And so some years we've chosen specific topics and invited people from different religions, different denominations, come and share their perspectives. And then it became a multi-faith event. And you do that as well, as I understand. I know you're having someone from the Muslim community come. We usually invited, because I knew him well, I was an adjunct professor at YSU, Professor Mir, who was the professor of Islam. He would come, spend time with us sometimes, as well as people of other faiths. So we got to learn about all kinds of different issues, many times very sensitive issues. And we drew then people from all of the various communities. I think over the course of time, drew from just about every faith community that Youngstown has.
You had the Hindus?
Hindus, Baha'i, all the different Christian groups.
The guys that wear their headpiece.
Sikhs.
The Sikhs, yeah. We did good projects here, Rabbi. We had them all.
Right, and so on. So it's all about learning. Every once in a while, we had somebody who wrote us a letter, very upset, because they said they came to learn from Jews and Christians, not from others. So I think Father George has accomplished a lot for the community in building bridges of understanding, but in such a way that people are educated. Father George is foremost great educator.
Well,
and a learner.
probably a learner. I'm into releasing of endorphins, what gives you a high. And so basically, this releases an awful lot of endorphins. It's very selfish. So I have to do a study on endorphins. That's another thing. If you remember the interview of Pope Francis on CBS, I think Pope Francis was taking a little poke at the eye of the people in the United States. You had to be careful to catch this. He says, yes, you Irish people brought your liquor, and your Italians, you brought the mafia. I think he was saying something to us. All these people are coming in as immigrants, and they're bringing illness and sickness, and they're going to take away our Social Security. Francis is a very sharp person. And I think as we're coming to an end, not the end, an end of time where we have to start changing a lot of our thinking, he has a lot to say. Pope Francis praised Jews for keeping their faith despite the Holocaust and other terrible trials throughout history, and reaffirming Judaism at the holy root of Christianity. This may have also taken comment about the Jews in Spain, where they call them Marranos. Christian on top, celebrating Judaism down below, keeping Judaism alive. Judaism is the holy root of Christianity. Remember, Jesus is Jewish. He's not Italian. And I say that because one of our residents at one time, he says, wanted to know why I was hanging around rabbis. I says, because Jesus is Jewish. He says, how could he be? He's Italian. Because every church we have is St. Lady of Mount Carmel. And that had more to do with Elijah than it does with the Carmelites. You notice that Jewish people who convert to Christianity, Edith Stein, they're Carmelites. And they're taken in the idea of Elijah, the one who was taken up, who was fired. We had Joe Rujak, who do the Croatian tour, just recently made comment to that Elijah gets fired. If you know how to read the book of Elijah and Elisha, Elijah means God is God. Elisha man is the man of God. You got to know your roots there. The Pope's letter, Francis made the statement in an unprecedented open letter to Eugenio Scalfari, and a prominent Italian atheist and founding editor of the liberal newspaper La Repubblica. The Pope's letter, published on the front page of La Repubblica on Wednesday, came in response to editorials this summer written by Scalfari, who had directly addressed the Pontiff on the issue of faith and religion. The Pope's reply affirmed the necessity of an open dialogue with non-believers, and he called right and proper and precious. The Pope also responded to Scalfari's query about what we should say to our Jewish brothers and sisters about the promise made to them by God. Has it all come to nothing? Believe me, the Pope wrote, this is a question that challenges us radically as Christians, because with the help of God, especially since Vatican Council II, we have rediscovered that the Jewish people are still, for us, the holy root from which Jesus germinates. And I reaffirm it again, it's in the present tense, Jesus is Jewish. He's not a Christian. That comes later when we call him Christ, but his real name is Joshua Bar Israel, Ben Israel. A priest from the Benedictine order, Father Isaac Jacob, said it probably would be better to talk about Jesus as Yahshua Israel more than the idea of. See, if you ask your Alexa, what is the meaning of the name of Jesus? She doesn't have an answer. Depends if she has a girl's voice or boy's voice. You can do that, but but it also goes back to the idea of Joshua. So did Jesus come as Joshua more than as Moses? That's a debate that Rabbi and I have to get on, because when it says, let his blood be upon us and our children, one of the most difficult passages in the Gospel of Matthew, that may be when Joshua comes down with Moses from Mount Sinai and they sacrifice and the blood is sprinkled on the people. You don't know that. I know that because I hang around rabbis. I talk more about religion with rabbis than I do with my fellow priests. I asked one priest one time, how are things going? He said, my garlic garden is going great. So we didn't talk about God, we talked about garlic. And so, just an aside,
It happens with us as well.
Believe me, the Pope wrote this, a question that challenges us radically as Christians, because with the help of God, especially since Vatican Council II, I repeat that, we have rediscovered the Jewish people are still for us a holy root which Jesus germinated. The Pope said that particularly through his close ties with the Jews in his native Argentina, because he has a good friend who is a rabbi, who surprised us on one of our Zoom presentations that he couldn't come in, that he spoke to us in our Jewish Christian study program when we have our lecture series. Especially what he had in mind was the memory of the terrible experience of the Shoah. Pope Francis added that, what can I say to you with the Apostle Paul is that God's fidelity to the close covenant with Israel never failed. And that through that terrible trials of these centuries, the Jews have kept their faith in God. For this we shall never be sufficiently grateful to them. As a church and as humanity. By doing so, Francis noted, Jews served as an example for Christians. Precisely by preserving in the faith of the God of the covenant, he said they called also us Christians to the fact that we are always waiting, pilgrims on the way for the Lord's return. And therefore, we must always be open to him and never take refuge in what we have already attained. Earlier this month, Francis wished the Jewish people a happy new year, Rosh Hashanah, and called for interfaith dialogue between the world religions, communities, and leaders. He also reiterated a statement last June saying, a Christian cannot be anti-Semite, and added to be a good Christian, it is necessary to understand Jewish history and traditions. So that's what Jewish Christian studies is all about, knowing who we are and where we come from. Now our commercial, coming on the 24th, I think, whatever the Tuesday of July, Rabbi David Kramer will be coming in and talking about suffering and how the Jewish approach death. This might startle you. Jews by dying redeem themselves. How you die. Now, I have a question for you, Rabbi, because this would come up. In the mourning of a dead person, you got, 3 days for the first day? What are the 3 mourning days for the Jewish community when they mourn someone who's died? You don't know the
Well,
answer?
we mourn for the 3 days is the most intense.
Okay.
Then we have the 7 days, which follow the funeral itself. And then we have specific things that we do to mark the year of mourning in the first month, afterward, and in the year that follows. And each period has alterations of our usual lifestyle to go through that process. And the mourning rituals of Judaism were standardized almost 2,000 years ago with the funerals and rituals, because at one point people were competing. Just look what happens with funerals and how much expense and other things people go with. So our sages looked at what is most helpful to mourners and how can the community help. And so they standardized all these things.
Another commercial, I guess. For Pete's sake, have a power of attorney, huh? And also get a will. My brother-in-law just died, and he didn't have a power of attorney, and it's all a big mess. Okay?
Oh, boy.
And so basically, please get a will
Yeah.
and a power of attorney.
If I may, I want to get back to something foundational, because when I think of what we're doing and really all the problems that occur in life and the various means we have through our religious organizations and institutions, etc., to monitor life, what occurs to me is that God is perfect, but people are not. And what happens is we get into trouble because people are in charge. If we look at the history of all our institutions, people don't always do a good job. In the period from the 4th century to the 18th century, when the church was the most powerful institution in Europe, they instituted a lot of legislation and norms which were foundational to anti-Semitism, the mistreatment of Jews, and all sorts of things. And when the Nazis came to power, all they had to do was re-implement those policies. Vatican II is important because, remember, it's up to human beings to manage and to set things right. And people are capable of all sorts of things. We can rationalize anything, even bad things. And that's why faith is so important. Faith is important because when something comes from God, we can anchor ourselves in it. We can depend on it. And if we're not sure about something, but we can rely on something we're learning from God. For Jews, it's through Torah. Torah is our medium for understanding God. For Christians, it comes through your traditions. It makes a huge difference. But with Vatican II, something very, very special happened. Father Roncalli, when he was in Greece, Turkey, and in 1944 in Paris, he did something very unusual. He saved a lot of Jews, a very unpopular thing to do at the risk of his life. And he had a very high position in the church. And so he was really someone who appreciated humanity, because another thing that we're losing now, as we in a time in history when there are fewer people who believe in God and have faith than any other time in history, people are also diminishing their appreciation for life itself and for the sanctity of life. As a Canadian, I can tell you that Canada is passing laws in order to make it easy for national institutions and anyone to take a life for no reason at all. Believe it or not, it's called MAID, Medical Assistance in Death. Okay, somebody can go to the hospital, say, I'm depressed, I don't think I want to live anymore, and as long as they have 2 people to co-sign, they'll help them end their life. How do you like that? So it's not just at the beginning of life, before birth, that we're seeing society in many parts of the world lose their appreciation for the sanctity of life. It's for every age group that we see that today. And Father Roncalli, when he saw what was going on in the Holocaust, had that piety, had that sense of righteousness, had that sense of divine value to appreciate that every life is sacred. And so he did everything in his power to save life. And as miracles would have it, he eventually became Pope John 23rd. And he looked at the whole panorama of human history, including the history of the church. And he called on leaders from the church and other faith groups worldwide. And in 1962, in October, he started through a mass, the Second Vatican Council. And his goal was to reevaluate everything honestly in order to set a new course.
Okay, Rabbi, it's my turn.
Right. There you go.
I want you to interpret for us the word zechor, remember.
Yes.
What happens in the
Zachor.
mind of a Jewish person when they remember? They bring it to the now,
Right.
right now, not yesterday or tomorrow, right now. In Matthew and Mark's gospel, Jesus never finishes the Passover. So basically, he doesn't drink of the fourth cup. The last cup that he drinks at the Passover is called the cup of redemption. Because of that background, when I say Mass, and I understand this, we're at the original Passover until Jesus comes back to drink the fourth cup. We have the Elijah cup and all that, but this is all, you'll find it in the Gospel of Matthew. So every time I stand at that altar, I'm at the original Passover until Jesus comes back to drink the fourth cup. I know I discombobulate the sisters when I do that at the altar and let them know that, because I add stuff into the canon that shouldn't be there. Like the disciples on the way to Emmaus. We've got 4 canons that say that. Basically, they recognize Jesus in the breaking of the bread. So basically, that's how I won the meal here, because I'm talking about Eucharist and you're talking about the apple. You sat down to eat your lunch. So there's a lot out there. He's going to continue on. That's all Pope Francis is doing, is implementing Vatican Council II to its fullness. We're going to hear more about this because it talks about Nestorian Christology, I won't go into that, influenced Mohammed. And I guess this is sort of a racist joke. Any Muslims here? Notice, basically, they get redemption by committing suicide. That's, I think, we have to ask the imam who's coming in to make the presentation next month. So this guy dies, and basically he wants to see Mohammed. So he has to go. He said, well, he says, you have to go up higher. So he runs into Peter, runs into Jesus, got to go up higher. Runs into Moses, got to go up higher. Finally gets all the way to Allah. And he says, I want to see Mohammed. He says, listen, he says, you had a heavy run here. Sit down, relax, enjoy yourself. But I want to see Mohammed. He says, let's have a cup of coffee first, okay? And basically, he says, okay, Mohammed, 2 coffees.
All right, I think we should entertain some questions before we run out of time. If anyone has any questions.
Father, you talked about the 4 cups. Can you explain that a little more?
Yeah, Jesus didn't drink the 4th cup. Passover's
were-
not over. Huh?
What were the first 3 then? What do you mean by that?
That's your department.
In the story, in the book of Exodus, when God is redeeming the Israelites, there are 4 levels of redemption and freedom. And so we have a cup of, at the Seder meal, where we're reenacting the Exodus. And we have a cup of redemption and freedom for each of those cups. And they signify freedom in different forms. And we actually even have a fifth one for Elijah, because that will be the future redemption. That's something we disagree about. When will the Messiah come? When will Elijah come to tell us the Messiah is here? But we do agree that we're always being tested, I think. We're always being tested. And in my tradition, Elijah can appear at any moment, at any time, disguised as anyone. And so when you're presented with somebody who's hungry, when you're presented with somebody who needs clothes, when you're presented with somebody who maybe is not a very sympathetic person, or other challenges, it could be Elijah testing us to see if we're ready for the Messiah to actually show up and redeem the earth. So we have to do our share in bringing redemption. And that's why we have those four expressions. And then the fifth for Elijah to say, okay. And it's part of everything that we do, and part of what Father George has done really over all the years, and that is to challenge everyone to actually do our share in bringing about redemption.
Yeah, I think along with that, Rabbi, as you drink those fourth cups, there's a progression going on. Like I say, the third cup is the cup of redemption. And then the other one is the fulfillment. I wrote a little ditty, if I could remember how to. Matzah and red wine, mystery divine, Jesus says, take, eat. So we participate on Jesus returning. I can't remember the rest of the song. That's a meditation on that. And then the idea of and singing hallelujah. It actually, there's 4 Hallel songs that end the Passover, and then we reserve that one for this little melody. A Slovenian folk song, in the sense of, because of Monsignor Gino Baroni, you got to know your culture so you can enjoy and appreciate the culture of others. I like that little black kid on the news, the idea that didn't like some of that Polish food, huh? But I'll take the ribs, huh? Just like Rabbi, what was the difference between Bishop Malone and Father George Balasko? Well, he was with Rabbi at Roda Shalom. Rabbi Berkowitz, because Malone liked pork chops. I like lamb chops.
Actually, Rabbi Berkowitz must have liked pork chops.
Well, I'm
He
going
was
to
a
say
Reform
nothing.
rabbi.
I'm going to say nothing. And this is how you really misunderstand the rabbis, okay? In communicating what he's saying and what I'm hearing. I'm outside the temple in the Rabbi Meyer's office. We're planning our first trip to Israel. And there's guys laying down tile at the big entrance of the temple, which is right across the street now from, it used to be Sable's funeral home. I think it was Bishop McFadden's house. And then they build the synagogue out on Logan Way. And so basically, Rabbi shows up at the door, and he says to the guys on the floor there, he says, which one of you is Rabbi Meyer? He says, funny guy. He says, and that's all the foreman said is, which one of you parked in Rabbi's spot? Okay. The other one is Rabbi Joseph here has suckers for the kids.
Kosher suckers.
Kosher suckers. Huh? And he gave one to one of the girls or something. She spit it out. Did it taste like bacon? I said, Rabbi, don't you buy kosher suckers? Give the answer, Rabbi.
They were kosher suckers with artificial bacon flavoring. The question is, why did she know what bacon tastes like?
So there's your communication. And so basically, I hope to do this. I'm coming into my 90th year, and I will celebrate my baptismal day more importantly than my birthday, because that's the Jewish custom in the sense of being baptized and called. And that's because of Father Ray Brown, one of my mentors. when I talked to Father Maley about my going to Israel and dealing with the Jews, he was my scripture scholar and teacher, very diplomatic. He says, he calls us in to give us our grades. He said, George, of all the guys that flunked, you got the highest grade. And so I says, what's my role dealing with Jewish Christian studies here and with the Jewish people? Help them to be the best Jew that they can be. So I have in fact, it would ruin the fic and frac story if we baptized you, Rabbi. And so that's what we're all about.
Any other questions?
Yes, thank you. Rabbi, I'm over here.
Oh,
I don't know if you can hear me that well.
Yes.
Though, but I have a more serious question, though, but two important questions. One is that if I understood you correctly, I'm speaking of Mike now, you said from the 4th century to the 17th century, the church, which I'm understanding the Catholic Church, was very instrumental in providing ideas that led to the Nazis in Hitler's reign to attempt a genocide. Would you clarify that? Because that's something that I
yes,
can refer to the fact that his blood be upon us and our children. And I understand there was anti-Semitism in Europe, but would you clarify to what extent that belief is being held at, and then I'll be quiet here.
Oh, thank you. There was a lot of, from the 4th century to the 18th century, there was a lot of legislation from different Lateran councils, etc. Some of the church fathers at the very beginning, like Chrysostom, advocated that Jewish synagogues get burned down. There were blood libels and all kinds of things that were created as something taught to communities that victimized and targeted Jews, to blame them for all sorts of things that they weren't guilty of. And it's still going on today, unfortunately, in spite of Vatican II and everything that the Vatican is doing to counter that. Not to mention the replacement theology, which is a theology that some clergy saw as defining Jews as holdouts and compete with Christianity. At the beginning of Christianity, there were more Jews than there were Christians. In fact, in the Roman Empire in the 1st century, 10% of the Roman Empire was Jewish, believe it or not. So Sala Baron, alav shalom, who was a preeminent historian in the 20th century, calculated there were 70 million, from primary sources, there were 70 million in the Roman Empire, 10% were Jews. Now we're just a minuscule fraction. And that's because of all the persecutions and genocide and everything that's happened. But there were leaders of the church over the years that made a norm of targeting Jews. Look at the Crusades. The Crusaders, on their way to the Holy Land, exterminated many Jewish communities completely. And look at Martin Luther when he's not Catholic, but influenced by Catholic Church. Martin Luther also advocated that he had 8 points to target Jews, and one of them was burning all the synagogues, preferably with the Jews in them. So there was a lot of history. Now, that doesn't mean that every Christian is an anti-Semite. All it means is that there have been a significant number of leaders, Christians, who were. And that's why I said, God is perfect, people are not. And therefore, it's the responsibility of every human being in every faith group to do what we can to set things right. So when we see these kind of things, we will address it. And that's why I was talking about Vatican II and the importance of that, the importance of people like Father George. And we see many examples of people who tried to counteract that. Among Lutherans, Bonhoeffer, who went back to Germany. And I met Jürgen Moltmann many years ago when I was still in Bangor. Jürgen Moltmann was one of the preeminent Lutheran theologians Tübingen. Tübingen, the center of the Lutheran world. And he also, even though he had no real relationships with Jews, he was influenced by Vatican II as well. And he thought, what can the Lutherans do? So he prescribed to, as a theologian, very influential one, this two-covenant theology, that God made an unconditional covenant with the Jewish people. And so when it comes to salvation, we have different concepts, different doctrines. But he said it's possible for Jews to find salvation through the covenant that God made with them. And so those who don't find salvation through Christianity and Jesus can find salvation through the covenant, the unconditional covenant that God made. And that was because he wanted to address the problems of anti-Semitism through his church. So, and what happened in the 18th century? The Enlightenment. Many faith groups lost their influence in the 18th century because of things, modern movements that occurred. So we're still fighting those battles, unfortunately, but with good people and drawing from their wisdom from every century, hopefully we'll win that battle for goodness and kindness. And I think when it comes to the story of the sin in the Garden of Eden, what do we have in common? Our doctrine about salvation is different. But what we have in common, very importantly, is that God taught us that we have to have the power to forgive. When there's sin, we have the power to forgive, and we have the power to grow. And that's something that we all have in common. Allows humanity to continue.
And I think that has to be a study of misunderstanding what was said, that his blood be upon us and our children. You have to go back to that Moses coming down with Joshua, and then having a sacrifice and sprinkling the blood on the people. That you got to see those two passages side by side, because Matthew is writing for the Jewish community. Mark is probably also, but more on the Roman side. And then you have the other traditions. Coming up in our presentation on Zooming, starting in September, getting to know God, getting to know all about God. That's going to be our presentation, and starting, hopefully, God willing, I have life, the 120 years. And by the way, after 120 years, you're back with God. The Jewish understanding of that.
We wish everyone longevity to 120 years with good health, because Moses lived till 120. He's our role model.
You want to continue to go on? You got any more questions?
Is this on? It's on, okay. This is a little on the lighter side, and I think it's about weddings. And I think it's because I've been watching Fiddler on the Roof. I've watched it 100 times. I love the film. But about in the 1980s, I don't recall the exact time, I was asked to be a music minister at a wedding. I was teaching at the School of Nursing at St. Elizabeth's, and one of the instructors, also Catholic, wanted to get married, and she wanted to marry one of the security guards from St. Elizabeth's who was Jewish. And I honestly don't remember who the priest and rabbi that were involved, but they couldn't decide, or they couldn't come to an agreement on where would this wedding take place. Would it be in the synagogue, or would it be in the Catholic Church? And it got to the point where there was an impasse. And so they found a rabbi in Pennsylvania and one of the priests locally, and the wedding took place at the Wick Pollock Inn. And I sang at the wedding. Now, here we are, 2024. I just wonder, how does that work for young people who happen to fall in love, and one is Jewish and one is Catholic? How does that wedding, where they want to both respect each other's religious backgrounds, how does this happen?
And I know the family. They're very nice people. I do know the family very well.
You get a Hanukkah bush.
Yes, I think traditional faith groups like when I guess For us, getting married. Oh, okay. I'll sit down here. It's better. Okay, when two people get married, traditionally in Jewish terms, it's called kiddushin. I guess we can compare it to a sacrament in Catholicism because it's a formal, sacred rite that brings people together. And so we have requirements for that. So in traditional Judaism, we don't do that for people who are of different faiths because those prayers don't mean the same thing to the different faiths. So that's why people who want to be intermarried in a traditional context have to do it in another way. So in a traditional synagogue, we would support those people, but not do the formal ceremony. And they were very nice people. Really.
Can I give a Rabbi Meyer addenda to that?
Yes.
It's easier to get out of a marriage because it's only between two people than to get out of a betrothal. In a betrothal, you have 6 people to deal with. The mother and father of the bride, the mother and father of the groom. In marriage, you're dealing with only 2 people.
Yes. I do know, had I been around for that, we could have worked something out.
Hopefully, they're happily married.
Well,
Okay.
but I'm in touch with the son once in a while. They had 3 children. All right. See, that's why I thought we should start the question period sooner because we clergy talk a lot. I apologize for
Rabbi,
myself.
I'm going to say nothing.
Actually, you have 30 seconds to spare.
Well, we're going to do our blessing that we have. That is our trademark, started with Rabbi Meyer. He gives the priestly blessing with the open hand, and I can't do that, and that was our trademark. It's on the tombstone of Rabbi Meyer out at the cemetery.
Yes, and he and I are both from the status of priest, the Jewish one.
And by the way, Faye did the artwork on that monument out at the cemetery, Alamet Cemetery. So I'll try to stand up.
Oh, you want to read that?
May the Lord bless you.
Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha.
May the Lord bless you.
Yair Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka.
May his face shine upon you and be gracious.
Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.
Look upon you with kindness. Real peace. Active word, it's not